Okay, check, radio check. I want to thank everybody for joining this week's call, weekly chat with Chris. If you're new to these calls, they typically go every week, 15 to 30 minutes. I wanted to do this topic, Social Security, and this is a topic that, because of the broadness, it's a confusing topic, a lot of disinformation. It's a lot of information. I mean, to the point where you get the deer in the headlight look. So what I wanted to do here is I broke down the content into 3 separate areas. There's some background that you have to take into consideration. And if everybody has a pen and paper, if not, it's a pretty easy mantra that I'd like you to retain or to remember. So go ahead and write this down, keep it, use it, tell it to your friends, and that is: Social Security decisions cannot be made in a vacuum. What does that mean? That means you can't take just one piece of information and make a good decision. This is why water cooler advice, the person that says, well, here's what I would do, right, is absolutely useless. You have to put it in the context of the person's overall financial plan. So with that said, without any further ado, we're going to go through. When we do these presentations, like I said, at Rutgers, it's done through a 501c3. Normally we do this over a 2-night period. I have folks in a classroom environment for 3 hours each night, and we can do a deep dive. And when we get to this area, right, we can sort of peel back the layers of all this information. But if I tried to do that right here, right now, I would lose half the audience, and people got to go and things to do. So this is why I said, A, this is going to be recorded, and B, we're going to break it up into piecemeal. And so each week, even if you miss the next couple of weeks when we do this, you'll be able to circle back and watch information. The first and foremost thing that I try and help folks to understand is retirement. When you finally enter into retirement, when you say, hey, I'm hanging up my cleats, I no longer will have any earned income, it will now be, depending on your age, like being on unemployment for the next 10, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. And that statement bears risk. Now, we have a picture of a mountain there, and I've gone over the theme ad nauseum in the past, and that is that, hey, listen, when we're going up the mountain, right, that's the accumulation phase. People are like, oh, what do you worry about? Things will be fine. And that's when you see that, those old commercials, ING commercials, what's your number? Or the Prudential commercial, what's your number, right? And all the data out there that in the marketing used to be around trying to accumulate some sum of money, and that was the magic number. But there are a whole series of risks that we're faced once we shut off that inflow of earned income. And you see some of those risks, but the biggest one, and the one at the top, is longevity. Now, you that are on this call, may know or have a better idea than anybody else. But I just had a phone call with a client yesterday whose father just passed. And he said, you know what? He made it to 93 and he was living a good life. And, and maybe that's, true for you, but maybe you've had experience where your parents died early. So, genealogy plays a role in some of the decision-making process, but none of us have that crystal ball. Only the person upstairs knows when we're going to meet our maker. But all we can do is be prudent in our planning, right? So I just share that with you, is that when you hear us talk about Social Security, right, that it is just a component to help us to make these years where we stop working more enjoyable, right? So the chances that one person in a married couple, both age 62, will live. So, if a married couple and they both make it to age 62, I find it pretty, interesting, because this number has increased since I've come into the industry, and I've been in the business 30 years. I remember back in early 2000s that the number was, that top number to the left over here was 93. and now it's up to 95. I didn't get a chance to look up the statistic before the call. I do know that we have more centurions living today, so that's people over the age 100, than we've ever had in US history. And the reason that's concerning is because it is projected that by, I think, the year 2050, and that's not that far off, 30 more years, that we could have in excess of 3 million centurions. So I forget the exact number right now. I think it's a couple 100,000, but it's growing exponentially. Not only is that going to put a drain on the system, people are living longer, but we're eating better. Where science is improving. We're more aware of what can go wrong. And if we are married and the spouse nurses the other one along and helps them to live longer, right? It's very easy to see how this can be a continually increasing number. If both of them make it to 62, there's 95% chance that they're making it to 75, right? So that's good news. And then, it's just, as we look at this, we have to prepare. So let's say you retire at 65, make it to 75. Okay, we got enough money. That's 10 years of income. How much are we spending a year? Let's say you need 100 grand a year to live. Well, that's $1 million that you just went through. Well, what if you live another 10 years? Now that we're at $2 million. I mean, that's not even inflating things. That's just maintaining lifestyle. So these are the things that we look at and understand why Social Security has such an impact on our decisions as we go forward. So retirement income planning, it's a successful approach, and retirement income plan must address many risks and factors such as longevity, taxes, inflation. Retirees need to properly understand all income planning factors and incorporate the proper income distribution plan to ensure that they don't outlive their resources. I mean, when we do these classes, we do these workshops, we do these nonprofits, one of the questions that I'll ask early is, what is the number one fear of Americans as they head into retirement? And almost a full room will raise their hand and say, running out of money in retirement. It is a valid fear. We've all heard stories where how somebody can become destitute in retirement, right? All these horror stories. So what steps can we take along the way to make sure that we are one of the ones that actually live a life that you've worked so hard for? So let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of using certain sources of income during retirement, right? So personal savings, employer-sponsored plans, Social Security. Today's topic is about Social Security, so that's where the focus is going to be. But it's the other two areas that can and should play a role overall. Social Security was never designed to be a retirement plan. Actually, Social Security is a commonly used term for Federal Old Age Survivors and Disability Program, and is administered by the Social Security Administration. The original Social Security Act was signed into law by FDR in 1935. Social Security is funded primarily through payroll taxes. You might better know it as FICA, right? What's FICA that gets taken out of our paychecks, right? Or the self-employment, you have to pay both sides of the equation. Taxes are collected by the Internal Revenue Service, and then it's entrusted to the FOA, Old Age and Survivor Insurance Trust Fund, and the Federal Disability Insurance Trust Fund, and the two Social Security trust funds, with a few exceptions. All salaried income up to the amount determined by law is subject to the Social Security payroll tax. That was a mouthful. But Social Security was really designed for, people were going off to war, people were killed in World War II, and, spouses were left destitute, and the government wanted to help. And this is a step that was put into place to help people that as they got older, right, as they became disabled, that there was some assistance. That's why it's a social system. And it's a great system. What you don't see in the name Social Security is a retirement income system, but many, many people view it or link it to their overall retirement plan. And it should be, because it is income, but don't weigh so heavily weighted that this is your retirement plan. So Social Security key factors: you'll be eligible for a Social Security benefit at full retirement age. That's FRA. So that is the magic number, and we'll look at that here in a second. So depending on your year of birth, it falls between age 65 and 67. If you elect your benefits early, you could receive a reduced Social Security benefit, and it could penalize you as much as 30%. This is where, when I had you write down that sentence before, this is where the water cooler advice can absolutely cost you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars by a poor decision with absolutely no information. So again, I will say it because it bears repeating. Social Security decisions should not be made in a vacuum. Your circumstances are different than your neighbors. So if you choose to take Social Security past full retirement age, you will earn delayed credits on your benefit up until the age 70. And we'll talk more about that in the future. How are your benefits calculated? This is the one where, a lot of people sort of know, and we used to get the paper statements every year, and now they come and they don't go. And, so we can always go into socialsecurity.gov. We can look up and order. There are challenge questions if you do that. If you, for whatever reason, the questions are geared towards information that only you would possibly know, I encourage everybody on this call to go out and look at their Social Security statement, see what they are, see what your benefits are, see what they're due to be paid. But you'll see part of it is I've had folks come in and one of the spouses had not completed 40 quarters of work. Maybe they were staying at home with the kids, right? They were helping out. Maybe for whatever reason, they were, only working part-time. What 40 quarters is akin to is 10 years of working. So if you have 10 years, you're now eligible. And then the equation that becomes a factor, they then look back and they take the highest 35 years, and that's how, and it runs through a pretty complicated formula, but they then use that number, and that's where the numbers come out to. And if you look at your report, you'll get three numbers. If you take benefits at age 62, if you take benefits at your full retirement age, and then if you wait until age 70, right? And you'll see obviously at age 62 is going to be less. Full retirement age is something that you go, okay. And then age 70 generally will be more. But the point that I want to make here is that when I was younger, I'll speak for myself, right? Came out of the Navy. I was making some money. But even my military career, my income was not as high as it is now. So what happens is you want to go back in those early years. The longer you're working, the zeros that you had early, because remember, they go back the highest 35 years. So maybe you worked for 50 years, right? If you work for 50 years, but it's the highest 35, let's say that 20 of those years were zero. Well, every year you work after that will replace one of those zeros with some income and will help bring up your average. Okay. The average highest 35 years, it establishes what they call a PIA, and that's your full retirement age benefit. And that's where that number is calculated through. And then years with no earnings, obviously you get averaged in zeros, which is never good for the calculation. Now there's a lot of numbers on here. I don't expect us to go through every slide in detail, but I basically ask you to look here and find the year that you were born. Off to the left is the year of birth. So whatever year. For me, it was 1964. So if you're after 1960, everybody is age 67. The reason this is important, if you're born after 1960 and you decide to take Social Security at age 62, you are taking a 30% haircut on your Social Security benefit. Now, I'm not even getting into taxes today because Social Security people used to think, oh, no, it's not taxed. It is taxed. It's subject to something called provisional income, right? Social Security is subject to taxes. So at the end of the day, you have to be aware that the Social Security, the year that you're taking it, if you follow that water cooler advice, could very well cost you over time, depending on when you pass. So 1960 or later, but maybe you were born in between 1943 and 1954, and your full retirement age is 66. And if you took it at age 62, well, now That's a 25% reduction. So that's what the difference is. Now it's a 25% reduction. So this is why when people say, and I'm not saying that, listen, you shouldn't take it at 62, because there's this fear in society. Oh my God, I got to get my Social Security as soon as I can. I'm retiring at 62, therefore I should take Social Security at 62. No, that is not always the best advice. Actually, it could cost you hundreds, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So keep that in mind, that again, Social Security decisions should not be made in a vacuum, and you shouldn't be listening to the person that has no training in how the Social Security system works in your entire portfolio and picture. We've talked again at length about the likelihood that taxes in the future are going to be higher. Well, this is an area where they can absolutely go back. Right now, anything that you earn combined income, provisional income over 44,000 can be 85% of that is taxed, right? So it's an enormous amount of money, right, that can be paid out in taxes because you're taking it. Well, maybe a better strategy is let's start to spend our 401k or 403b or IRA, TSP, and delay this and let this grow. I don't know if that's the right answer. You're going to see that that's something that we can look at and do an evaluation ahead of time versus making an irrevocable decision or making it very difficult to change your mind if you elected at age 62 and 12 months is going by and you ask the IRS or the Social Security Department, hey, I changed my mind, I want to go back. Well, you got to send them a check, and if too much time is going by, you can't do it. All right, so this slide right here just basically reinforces what I just said. The only point I will say, where can you get 8% on your money? I mean, safely. Very difficult to do in today's world. So what this slide is showing us, if we have the discipline, if we have the wherewithal, if we understand the puzzle that we're faced with, every year you're waiting from 66, if this was your full retirement year between these birth dates, if you wait from 66 just 1 year, your income will have increased by 8%. Not a bad deal from the federal government. So, and then if you wait 2 years, this is why we were saying up until age 70, that's 8% a year, could be a 32% increase. And the only way to see what that number is for you to go to socialsecurity.gov and look up and see what it'll be for you. But Chris, you might say, what am I going to live on if I don't take Social Security? I don't know your circumstances. If you don't have any money and you have to do this, then it is what it is. But if you have other resources, let's maybe consider it's what I call it from a mechanical engineering standpoint, order of operation. What is the withdrawal order? And where people usually find out or usually get into trouble or realize I should have had a V8, as soon as they retire, let's say it was in this example 66, they turned around and they go, oh, I took Social Security and I took some money out of my 401k or IRA to live on. And then they saw how much they owed in taxes. Whoa, 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 whoa. I don't want to do that. I don't want to pay all that money in taxes. So what do? They defer taking money out of their IRA or their 401k. And then what does the government do? At age 72 right now, and there's talk that it'll go to 75, they implement something called RMDs, required minimum distributions. Now you're being forced to take the income out of that time at a point in time where you have zero tax deductions at your age. And now the government is, and likely at a higher tax bracket now, and you could have made a small mathematical error. So my point is, again, I've said it now probably 4 times on this call, Social Security claiming decisions for you and your spouse should not be made in a vacuum. Do not listen to the person at the water cooler. It's probably not, it's their opinion, but based on no specific circumstantial evidence of what you currently are doing. All right, and then if you'd like a Social Security optimization report, this is a report that me or anybody that's, if one of the advisors that's on here has invited you on this call, you'd like it run for you, they can run it for you, right? No cost to you. right? It'll look something like this. It'll basically tell you how your primary strategy makes a difference. And you can see the red line, the black line, the green line. If we take it early, that's red. In this example, it just shows we've suggested a claiming strategy that would pay about $1.6 million over your remaining life compared to other options, right? This is what we're able to do is we collect the data, we run a report. It says, based on the assumptions, this is something that, you know, we think you could or shouldn't do. You don't have to follow the advice, but at least you're no longer just making wild ass guesses. They call that a WAG in the financial industry. We're here to make informed decisions, educated guesses, you know, to help you to live a lifestyle and a retirement that you worked so hard for. This is our disclosures. You know, we have to put that up there, all that content I didn't make up. And then lastly, I want to thank each and every one of you. If you got questions, if you'd like a retirement report, otherwise join us next week because I just scratched the surface. We're going to get into some of the nuances that follow around Social Security. And this is why it gets so confusing. So I hope to see you here next week. Don't keep us a secret. And again, if we can help you out in any way, let us know. Chris Lester from Professional Planning Services here in New Jersey. Have a great day. Bye-bye.